but I think we can go ahead and get going. We want to be respectful for everybody's time. First of all, I just want to give a brief and sincere welcome to everybody for joining on our lunch hour discussion to talk about COVID-19 and its impacts to the Idaho ag industry. My name is Braden Jensen. I'm the Deputy Director of Governmental Affairs for the Idaho Farm Bureau Federation. I'm based out of Boise, and so I work with my colleagues all around the state, our regional managers and our team there in Pocatello. Sure do appreciate Joel Benson, our Director of Information, who is hosting the meeting and operating a lot of the technical side of things. We'll go through a couple housekeeping things here in just a minute, but I wanted to make sure we gave a couple minutes to our president, Brian Searle, a farmer from Shelley, Idaho. If he wants to take a couple minutes and welcome people to the call, that would be great. President.
Well, thanks, Braden. Appreciate that. And as mentioned, thank you for getting on the call today. You know, as we've seen things come to a standstill in our own communities and state and nation and the world, one thing that hasn't come to a standstill is agriculture and the challenges that we're facing. American Farm Bureau has been doing a campaign called Still Farming to let people know that, you know, we are still out and we're providing food for them. And a few days ago, we had a conference call and I brought the question. I said, well, we're still farming, but how are we going to continue to do that and sustain that as we go forward with the challenges that are there? So we felt the need to be communicating, to let people be aware, and to make sure that we're all working together the best that we can for solutions. There's no magic tree out there, a gold tree with money falling off it. The government's doing some things. Some of those are, in my opinion, are Band-Aids because this could be a long-term situation. But we're working together, and there's been multiple conference calls. So anyway, with that, welcome to the call. Welcome to the opportunity that's here. Look forward to some of the things that will be presented today. And these are just a few. I know Braden will cover that. These are a few. There's others that we're very involved in as well. If you have questions on them, we can always talk anytime, other times. So go ahead, Braden. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President. We really do appreciate that. And again, we welcome everybody on to this lunch hour discussion. So I just wanted to cover a couple housekeeping things. I know that many of us are getting a little bit more used to these Zoom platforms or these conference call platforms. Just so that everybody is aware, we recognize that some people are joining just by telephone and others are joining on the computer. For those that are on the computer, if for whatever reason you wish to unmute your line, just in the bottom left-hand corner, you're able to do that as well. There is a chat feature at the bottom of the screen as well. We would encourage anybody who's using the computer to go ahead and use that chat feature to type in a question. If there's a specific question, we will have a couple different segments where you can ask questions to the presenters. And so go ahead and use that feature. Otherwise, if you are on the phone, feel free to unmute your line once we get to that portion of the agenda, and we'll make sure that you have a chance to speak up. So I just wanted to quickly review the agenda so everybody knew exactly. Again, for those that are on the phone, we recognize that you don't have a screen in front of you, and then we'll quickly turn back over to our presenters. So first of all, we're going to be listening to Dan Hammond from D.L. Evans Bank. He's going to be talking to us a little bit more about the Paycheck Protection Program, those loans that are available through the Small Business Administration. After that, we hope to have Tom, and I see Tom Daly is connecting right now, and so we'll listen to Tom Daly, our director from the FSA, the state director, and he'll give us some information on the FSA front. Following that, we will have Joel Anderson with Snake River Farmers Association, and he will talk to us a little bit about the labor and the H-2A issue. And then we'll give time to our State Director of Ag, Director Celia Gould, to give us a little bit of the Idaho perspective and how ISDA is operating during this time of coronavirus and shutdown orders and things like that. So we will turn the time now over to Dan Hammond, and we'll give him the opportunity to share a few things. I will state that we do recognize that Dan has other obligations, and that we're going to give him a chance to speak, and then we'll open it up for a few questions directed to him. And then we recognize that he's going to have to go, and then after that, we will go ahead and listen to the other three presenters, and then hold questions until the end after that. For those of you who are on the phone or just in general in the audience, if you don't have that opportunity to get your questions answered in this, please feel free to follow up with one of us, or one of the regional managers. Get your questions to us, or put them in the chat feature, and then we will make sure that we can follow back up with you. So with that, if we don't have any questions, and I don't see any, Joel, in our chat box, we're going to give the time to Dan Hammond. Dan is the Senior Vice President of Regional Credit Officer for D.L. Evans Bank. Dan, if you want to go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to Justin Patton to ask me to talk to you. This is one of the more exciting things that's ever happened in a banker's career, is to actually be able to lend money and not expect it to be repaid back on purpose. So that perks up people's ears. And I'm going to talk about this Paycheck Protection Program. What I want to do first is give you some information that any of you out there with Google and a search can find all the information that the banks know, that the accountants know, that everybody knows. This Paycheck Protection Program is part of the CARES Act. The CARES Act is a really cool acronym for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And that's what you see on the news and everything. And so if you were to Google the CARES Act, that's where you can find this stuff. And we use as our guide the NAGGL summary, N-A-G-G-L summary, which is the National Association of Government Guaranteed Lenders. And that's kind of where we're getting our guidelines for. The other place to go look, and it's very simple, very easy. If anyone has any questions or wants to look or research, everything that's known about this thing is on treasury.gov. So www.treasury.gov. If you plug that in, there's a red bar at the top that says, if you're a small business and would like to know more, poke here. And when you do that, it brings up a whole bunch of stuff. Has an overview of, there's buttons. It says you can get an overview here. If you're a lender, click here. If you're a small business, click here. If you want an application, click here, and so on. So, but that is everything that is known. That's where the banks go to get their information. That's where the accountants go. And that's a resource, you know. And some of this is coming in waves, and it has changed hourly over the last week. So it's good to refresh and check. Well, let me talk to you about the Paycheck Protection Program. First of all, any small business, or every small business in America, should be looking at this, and they are all eligible if they pay wages, W-2 wages. That does include ag. That's a sole proprietorship, a LLC, a Inc., any business that pays wages is eligible for this. The size restriction is if you have 500 employees and under. There are some affiliations rules that you have to go through if you're a smaller business but have common ownership and things. But for the most part, we're talking about mom and pop operations here today, 500 and less employees. And what they're doing, they're trying to keep people employed during this coronavirus war that we've got going on. And they can go in and basically apply for a loan. The bank is doing, or sorry, not the bank, the government is basically doing a subsidy, a grant, if you will. They're putting the money out there to keep people employed, and they're using the banks as the instrument to get the money out there fast and to do the work and to get her there. And it is based on the SBA platform. So if you're a business paying wages, you can apply for a loan to cover 8 weeks worth of your average payroll, plus another 25% for certain eligible expenses, which include interest and rent and utilities and things. And the real nice and easy formula for that is if you get 8 weeks plus 25%, that's 10 weeks of your payroll. So the way that you do it, you find the lender that you'd like to work with, and they'll ask you for the documentation from your accountant or how you do your taxes, your W-3s, which summarize your W-2s, your 941s, basically your tax documents that show what your payroll was for last year. For the 12 months of 2019, you take your 12 months, you divide by 12, you times it by 2.5, or divide by 52 and times by 10, however you want, and that is the amount of payroll that you have. So if you have an average payroll of $100,000 a month, you're basically eligible for a $250,000 loan. The application is, there's basically name, address, tax ID number, who you are, where you're at type of stuff. It's a 2-page deal. There are certifications that basically you have to be SBA eligible. So if you're anything that would kick out a normal SBA lender or eligibility, like if you're a convicted felon or if you're not a citizen or things like that, that will kick you out. But if you're eligible for an SBA loan, there's a 2-page deal that you do. There's a couple of pages of instructions that goes with that. And you can make an application through your lender. Now, the lenders that you work with are any lender that is an SBA lender. Typically, that is your commercial banks. I've heard of a credit union that is doing SBA loans, and some of the ones that many of your agricultural people work with, to my knowledge, like Rabo and Farm Credit, Idaho Ag Credit, they are not doing them. They say refer to your depository institution or call a commercial bank. There is a process for non-SBA lenders to become eligible, but it's a very arduous task to get everything all through and set up a platform and do these type of loans. Now, what will happen when you apply for your lender, they will check through their stuff, submit through things, and get an SBA authorization number. When they get that SBA authorization number, then those funds are committed for that. There's $349 billion, I think, is what was appropriated in the first deal, in the first wave. I saw something on Good Morning America where they're talking about a second wave that's a little larger. I'm not sure. I didn't catch enough to see if that's talking or if it's done, but there's that part. The banks will then, once it's approved and once they've checked all the documents, they will generate a loan so that they put the money in the business's account. The business then has, from the time they get that money, they have 8 weeks to keep their employees employed, and at the end of 8 weeks, they would come back and apply for forgiveness of that loan. So they basically show, here's the wages that we paid and here's our qualified expenses and things, and make that application. Then when that goes through, then that loan would be forgiven. It would show as a debt forgiveness. It will not be adverse on your credit, and it will not be taxable income. Dana, who's our branch manager here, just handed me a note, which is quite important. I gave you those other things, but use the info from treasury.gov. That is the most up-to-date, most accurate stuff. And like I say, this thing has changed and changed and changed, and not everything's up to date. And there's lots of other things in there you have to be very careful of. Of course, it's one of those things that's ripe for fraud and things. So treasury.gov is the source that you want to be into. Let's see, what else can I tell you about this? It's really a slick deal. Is there enough money? Each bank sets their own limit of how much they want to lend. I'm sure if you watched this thing, you all heard that, you know, the first day that they could accept applications was Friday, April 3rd. And that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, one of the larger banks had appropriated $10 billion. They said, "Whoops, we're done." And so it's each banks can do their own amount of what they want to do. And of course, they're using their money. They can only do so much. There's a couple of caveats that are happening to that. There is presently talk, I don't know if it'll come through or not, that the SBA would buy those loans, and which would create more funds that they could make more loans with those. That is a deal that could happen. I'd like to just read you or tell you here a little bit from our CFO. As of yesterday morning, our own bank, as of this would have been through Wednesday night, had approved 525 SBA confirmation approvals that would fund more than $94 million in loans. We have many more loans that also will be approved and funded. We've got quite a good process going now. It's taken some time to get up and going. We're very proud of the loans that we're able to do, because every PPP loan that we approve and process makes a difference in a community, a business, a family, or children. There's multiple banks have had a hard time with this. You're going to hear an awful lot of it, in and out, off and on, up and down, because rules keep changing, they keep changing, they keep changing. So Wednesday afternoon, very late, we finally got the approval of what the actual loan docs would look like. And so that some of those earlier approvals, they came in, and I think, was it Wednesday or Tuesday, they said, "Oh, by the way, for your SBA authorization to be valid, they've got to be funded in 5 days." Well, that meant that tomorrow all these loans would have to be funded that was approved last Friday, or when they told us that. Then the next morning it changed to 10 days. So what they're trying to do is, from the time it's approved, to have the money approved or funded within 10 days. Our own bank is starting to do things late yesterday and today. We have some branches that have loan docs ready to sign and be able to fund. Of course, we are wanting to do as absolute much as we can over the internet, using DocuSign, because of the coronavirus things. We're doing social distancing. Our branch lobbies are locked. You have to call and make an appointment. As you might suspect, we started, I'm talking our bank, we put the application on the website, and as soon as some of the large national banks said that we're out, people look around and see who is, and all of a sudden here comes this whole flood of applications. And so, from who knows where, of who, don't know these people, just because we're one of the applications still processing. So Our bank has taken the application off of the website. You would need to contact a loan officer in order to get an application processed. We are continuing to accept applications and process them. We feel that the ones that we had taken should all be funded, but we can absolutely not make a guarantee that any future applications we would fund or will be eventually funded, because there's some deals out of our control that could happen. If the government hit their limit and did not reapprove some, or if we hit our limit with the bank and, you know, we have to still meet a certain liquidity crises and we don't have so much money to lend. But we feel good at this time, and I mean, we're continuing on going with that.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Oh, yes, what?
That's perfect. Thank you very much for all that information. I think that's a wealth of knowledge. I'm looking at the chat feature right now. We do have a couple questions that have come in. One from a couple from Terry Jones and another one from Bobby Vicandy. We'll make sure to get those questions answered as well. I just want to make sure that we have plenty of time for our other presenters as well.
You bet.
Dan, you've covered a lot of incredible information here. We really do appreciate it. And if you're okay with it, we're going to follow up on a couple of these questions with you as well, recognizing that you may have to log off. Why don't we go ahead and move on in the agenda. We'll go ahead and move on to Joel Anderson, if you're available.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we sure can. Thank you, Joel. We're going to, just for everybody who's on the phone, Joel Anderson, he is the Executive Director of Snake River Farmers Association, and he is the expert when it comes to H2A, and probably the man in the know when it comes to this topic. And so just wanted to give some of the latest updates. We know that there has been a lot of concerns, a lot of questions surrounding H2A. Joel will probably be able to give us a little bit of an update of where we have been and some of the challenges that we still might face. So, Joel.
Great. Thank you, Braden. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And before I start, I want to thank everybody in the ag community who has been so active trying to reach out and solve some of these problems as they happen, as we react to them. But then there also have been several people that we've been able to work with to try to proactively avoid problems that we see coming, but before they actually happen. And so there's been a concerted effort on many fronts, and I appreciate everybody's collected work on this issue. As with everything else, this has been a very, it's been a long, strange road so far, and obviously unprecedented. There are a lot of things, a lot of bridges that we've crossed, but there are several that are still evolving. So the good news is, as our season, typically just kind of being from a self-serving perspective, our season slows down when your season gets going. And so we're actually kind of in the spot right now where we're thankfully starting to see things slow down for us, because workers are starting to get into the field. But we still have summer and harvest applications that we're going to be working on. And so we're not out of the woods from our end at all. What I wanted to start with is just kind of talking about the biggest threats to the H2A program. And this is for those of you that use the program, but then I also think it affects those that don't use the program, because while there is we've all seen the unemployment rate spike, and while there is, in theory, going to be an abundance of U.S. workers in the workforce that may be able now and available to take some of the jobs, I think that that's still just kind of my experience in doing immigration law. I've been doing immigration law for 20 years. My experience is it's just getting tougher and tougher to find U.S. workers that are able, available, and willing to fill the jobs. Even in an economy like this, I think those of you that use the H2A program will have the H2A workers to the extent that they can get visas. And then others will potentially have the opportunity to find U.S. applicants. And then those who use H2A, they'll be competing. Those who can't fill all their H2A slots will be competing for U.S. applicants as well. So I think that despite the downturn and the jobs, kind of the job situation, I still think it'll probably be a challenge. I hope I'm wrong, but I still think it'll be a challenge for a lot of growers to staff their farms. From a processing perspective, the biggest threat that we faced on March 16th, the Department of State announced that they were suspending all routine visa processing. We scrambled, and for the last 3 weeks, we've been trying to get Department of State to at least relax, if not completely suspend their suspension. And we have been successful with a lot of our members and a lot of members of Congress that have leaned on the President's task force and the Department of State to relax some of their processing at some of the key consular processing posts. The state of affairs right now, and this is what's on the ground and what's going on, is across the globe, they still have a suspension of routine, consulates have a suspension of routine visa processing. So any type of visa processing that's going to happen right now has to be one that does not require an in-person interview, and B, it has to be determined to be essential and critical. So fortunately, we have gotten the H2A classification is defined and classified as essential, obviously because of the agriculture and the food security of the United States. That said, across the globe, we still have some issues with specific consular posts that they may be willing to or able to process some H2As, but then the countries themselves are on lockdown. And so that's been a curious challenge. For example, Peru, a lot of our members in Idaho and Montana bring in Peruvian H2A workers. Right now, the country will not allow travel in or out. So even if someone had an H2A visa, they can't get out. The same is true with South Africa. We obviously won't allow people from the UK to travel. Nicaragua is locked down, and Jamaica. So some of these countries that provide a decent number of H2A workers to the US, there's no flow of workers coming from them. Fortunately, Mission Mexico, the U.S. Department of State in Mexico, understands the importance of the H2A program and that an overwhelming majority of the H2A workers in the U.S. come from Mexico. So they have been bending over backwards to try to find ways to facilitate, in accordance with the policy written on March 16th, to still continue processing. So they are processing H2A visas, but it's on a limited, kind of a scaled back basis for anybody who has an ineligibility and might require some special handling or some, like a waiver of a ground of inadmissibility. They're not handling any of those right now. But any worker or applicant who does not require an in-person interview, they will continue to process, and they'll just do the online portion of the application, and they'll conduct their background checks based on either historic fingerprints that they already have in their records, or based on biometrics from pictures that you submit, and they do the biometrics check in their databases as well. So they've been willing to process, and we've gotten, of our members and workers that needed to process in this window of time, we had about a third of them were initially precluded from getting a visa or even applying. We've been working with them, and we got it up to the point now where only about 15% are not eligible now to apply, meaning 15 to 20, so 80 to 85% of our workers now are able to process. So that's been it's been a big development and a huge help for our growers right now as they're getting their water in and getting their crops planted. I don't see the Department of State and the visa issuance as a current significant threat, though that could change. I think that's been resolved.
The computer wasn't.
And the agenda says specifically the visa processing issue, and so hopefully I've addressed that. I think that we're in a good spot now after much effort, and I think the president gets it. He mentioned in his press conference a couple of days ago, the H-2A program by name, and he said, we know the farmers need these workers. So that's been an important development. The other challenges that exist, those are the ongoing emergent issues, and one is kind of the unknown of what happens when a worker gets to the United States who later tests positive for the virus. And when it comes to social distancing, when it comes to quarantines, when it comes to an employer's obligation for, is it work comp related or not? I think we have some general assumptions for what the answers to some of those questions might be, but we don't know for sure. With the H-2A program, employers have to provide housing to their H-2A workers and to any U.S. workers that might have traveled in to take a job. And we don't know necessarily what it's going to look like for some growers if they have to quarantine some of their workers and they don't have enough housing space, because a lot of these housing locations are very rural and you don't have an abundance of options for where you can house the workers. Department of Labor has been flexible, and they've issued some guidance and some rules for what happens if you need to make some modifications. But right now, we haven't gotten to that bridge yet because it hasn't come up with any of our employees or any of our members yet. So that's going to be an evolving thing that we're going to get to work with when it comes time. They've also allowed, Department of Labor is pretty strict generally, but they have loosened up a bit to allow modifications to what work might be acceptable for the H-2A workers to do. Normally, you have to specifically put it in your contract that this is the work and these are the job duties. And if it's not on there, they can't do it. But they've relaxed it to account for some of the realities on the ground that, hey, if you need to modify your work contract, you can in some circumstances, as long as it's ag-related. You might even be able to modify some of the work sites if you didn't initially list a work site, as long as it's in the area of intended employment initially disclosed. You might be able to add some work sites too, so there's been some flexibility there. And you might need to change your contract start dates or end dates as a result of COVID-19. So that's something that for those of you who do use the H-2A program, I would strongly recommend you work with your case manager if you're a Snake River Farmers Association member. And if you have somebody else that does them or somebody in your staff takes care of them for you, be very, very mindful of the FAQs that DOL is putting out, because they're kind of building this airplane in flight, and as we all are, and things are coming out quickly. Similar to what Mr. Ham mentioned as far as like the PPP, some of these things you don't know how they're going to be handled until it comes up and the policies are addressed. So that's an emerging question with is COVID-19 specifically as it relates to the H-2A workers. And then other issues that are coming up right now that I'm pretty concerned about, though it hasn't materialized yet, is the travel within the state of within the country of Mexico between the intrastate and internal movement of individuals in Mexico itself, because so many of the workers come up through Mexico. The consulates, we've cracked that nut, and I think we've gotten that resolved, but the workers still have to be able to get from their homes to the U.S. consulate to get the visa, and then from the consulate up to the border and into the country, or fly. Got to get to the airport and get out. There hasn't been a limitation, like a per se limitation by the government yet, but some of the states have started to implement some, not stay home orders, but social distancing and some directions that you should stay home and you can't congregate in groups larger than a certain number of people. Buses, as a matter of economics, and airlines have started to cancel some of their flights or some of their runs. And so we've had some workers that have been scheduled to get up to the consulate to pick up visas, but haven't been able to make it when they were anticipated. Basically, they're able to reschedule things or maybe arrange for travel on their own and try to arrange for someone to take them and drop them off. But it has been getting more and more difficult over the last week to week and a half to actually facilitate the internal movement within Mexico. The other emerging threat, and I think this is a pretty significant one that we're trying to address preemptively, is right now they've closed the U.S.-Canada and U.S.-Mexico borders to all non-essential travel. Fortunately, obviously, as we discussed, this is essential travel. My concern, though, stems from what happens when Mexico starts getting a significant number of COVID-19 diagnoses and their confirmed cases, to where the U.S. government now sees that having workers coming across the border would be a threat, because the risk of bringing the virus into the country with the workers as they travel. So the concern would be, if there is going to be some type of limitation on movement allowed, will the government allow for people to test at the border prior to entry, or will they just shut it down and say we can't admit them? So right now we're trying to work with members of Congress to get some funding, and we're trying to see about supply chains to see if there's any way to get testing down to the border if they went to that next step. We don't see that happening necessarily, but it's the hope that it doesn't, and if it does, we need to be prepared for it.
Joel, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, it's a lot of information. I'm sure you could probably keep on going for several more minutes. I know that me and you have had plenty of conversations about this, and I just want to say to everybody who's on the call today how much we appreciate our working relationship with Joel and with Snake River Farms, and the service that they provide the ag industry here in Idaho. I don't have any questions queued up in the chat box, Joel, but if a few questions do come up, I'm assuming we can still reach out to you. And
absolutely, by all means. And I want to thank you for all you're doing, Farm Bureau, and everybody in the community pulling together.
Well, thank you very much. And if you're going to stay on as well, I'm sure we might have a couple of minutes for a couple of questions maybe at the end. So thank you again, Joel. We'll move on now to Director Celia Gould. Director Gould, if you want to unmute your line, bottom left-hand corner there. Director Gould obviously is the director of the State Department of Agriculture. We look forward to hearing a little bit from you, Director. We recognize that this has occupied a lot of your phone calls and a lot of your meeting time, this topic, and so we'd appreciate any update you can give us from a state perspective.
Thanks, Braden. It's great to join you guys today. I appreciate seeing somebody. It's kind of lonely out here. We've had the opportunity to shelter in place at the ranch, and I'm enjoying it, but I haven't seen many people. So anyway, it's good to get a chance to visit with you. Yeah, it's taken quite a bit of time, and management from a distance is kind of tricky. What we used to be able to do by just gathering everybody together in the office and accomplishing in 10 minutes, now it takes 6 or 7 phone calls, it seems. But anyway, it's working. We still have our field staff out doing inspections and doing all the things that should be happening for the most part. There are a couple of exceptions. We had to put our pesticide licensing on hold for a while for new applicants. We did some things to try to remedy that. One of those is extending the licenses beyond 2 years to 3 years for this time period for those people that did have a license, and trying to accommodate how we can on that. But that has been a bit of a challenge for us. The thing that's consumed most of my time as of late is there have been a lot of calls with USDA and with our National Ag Directors Organization as far as the money that will be coming from the feds, and I'm anxious to hear from Director Daly. But at this point in time, I don't know that we've gotten clear direction on how that will be apportioned. The Secretary has $9.5 billion at his discretion, and there is another $6 billion that is in the CCC program that will be coming out by July. But the $9.5 billion right now, they're looking for ways to get that out on the ground. We are getting lots of calls from industry. As a matter of fact, I think that at this point in time, I would say If you don't need the money, then please call, because we're assuming that everybody else does. And I don't need to tell you folks how bad all the industries are hurting right now. As a matter of fact, I talked to the governor yesterday on the subject, because one of the things that has come up is possibly block grants to the states. And if that comes up, then it will be up to the states to pick the winners and the losers, which is not an enviable position to be in. I told him that probably at this point in time, from all of the folks that we're hearing from, it sounds like maybe we better just cash the checks, get the state plane, and kind of drop the money out over ag country and let everybody scramble for it. But I realize that's discriminatory towards us old folks, because we can't scramble quite as fast. It's, in all seriousness though, we are starting to plan in the eventuality that there might possibly, if not this tranche of money. We do hear that Senator Baldwin from Wisconsin, and we have heard from Senator Risch's office, he's working on that with Senator Baldwin, are looking at trying to get some more money for ag funding for state block grants. So we'll see. What we would encourage industries to do is try to devise some sort of a plan that they feel would work best for their industry. And then that would give us the guidance we would need going forward. I know that it's hard to put together a plan when you don't even know for sure that the money is coming in, but that would be preferable to needing to get the money out quickly, and the bloodbath that might ensue if we don't have some sort of an organized plan with a lot of industry input. So that's kind of where we're at as an agency. We're taking it a day at a time, proceeding. Quite frankly, I'm really proud of our managers at the Department of Agriculture. They've done a good job, in my estimation, of managing people without being able to gather people up and maybe do some of the trainings and some of the things that we would like to be doing right now. But we're not getting a whole lot of complaints at this point in time. Brian Cyril has not even called in and complained to me lately. So I think things are going pretty well, unless I hear differently. So that's what I would like to hear on the phone call, is any suggestions or ideas that you have that we can, at this point in time, we still are regulators and we will still be regulating, but we don't want to make your lives any more difficult than it already is. So that being said, I would leave it at that and welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Director. We really do appreciate it. And at least from the Boise office perspective, we do appreciate the work that your staff is doing, how accessible they have continued to be during this whole time. And we really do appreciate that. We also look forward to a few things, and I guess as things continue to develop, I'm sure we'll generate a few more questions as well, and we'll make sure to funnel some of the things that we are hearing from our members and the folks on the ground, and we'll make sure to convey that to you and your staff as well. We want to go back to Director Daly before we open it up to potentially at least a few minutes of questions. And again, if you're interested and you're on a computer, type your questions in the chat box. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to any Farm Bureau staff, and we'll make sure to get those questions answered, do some follow-up, and make sure that you get the answers, at least to the best of our knowledge right now. Director Daly, we're going to turn it back to you if you're joining on the telephone by chance.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. That sounds good.
Okay, well, we tried that the first time we tried that and it didn't work, so that's why I went on the computer. But
we appreciate it. We apologize about the technology sometimes, but Director Daly, thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate it. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. Just so that you're aware, we've got about 11 minutes before we need to wrap up. But again, we're trying to be respectful of everybody's time. So the time is yours.
Okay, very, very quickly, I just wanted to say our offices are open. They're locked like the banks and everything else, but we do have our people in the offices that can take telephone calls, etc. As Director Gould said, the CARES Act gave the department $9.5 billion. They're in the process of developing how they're going to distribute that equitably. And so I would request the same thing that she requested. If you have any ideas, the department wanted me to ask everyone to funnel up to them ways that we can, in fact, improve what we're doing. We are, in fact, trying to do some things like everyone else is doing, electronic signatures, deadline flexibilities for our loans, etc. I have Aaron Johnson on the phone with me as well. He can go over some of the loan things. We have adjusted our times for payments and that sort of thing, and I'll have him go over that quickly before we have to finish.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Daly. Just a couple of things. We had probably one of our banner years that we had last year. Some of you may know that the Farm Bill increased our limits of what we were able to help farm producers. I think the biggest thing that I'd like to point out is that all our offices are still open. We have all our loan officers rotating through the office, and some of them are working at home. Over the last 2 weeks, we have had a great influx of producers starting to put together their loan packages to look for lending in the next year. We know that we're kind of in a fluid time, not sure what COVID-19 is going to do to us, but we are in the point of continuing forward in business as such, looking at crop production basically remaining the same. So I'm encouraging any of these farmers to come in and see us. We've changed our name from used to be the lender of last resort, and I think now we've kind of changed the name to say we're the lender of opportunities. But boy, the opportunities really come right now to us. We are trying to do what we can to keep farmers on the farm so we can feed Idaho. I was on a call this morning with the national office, and they are also, are doing what they can to make sure that we have enough money put into all the cohorts so that we can take care of the farmers, regardless of what happens with their banking or whatever. We are trying to go forward. We are trying to be a little bit more lenient, and we're trying to be able to keep these farmers actually on the farms. I don't know if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask Director Daly and myself, but we are trying to help the farmers. A lot of our farmers are beginning farmers, and a lot of them don't have the equity or to be able to rely on their capital to protect them. So we will continue to go forward and do what we can to help them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that update, and we do recognize FSA as a valuable resource to our members at this time. And like you say, the opportunities are plentiful right now, and we look forward to getting additional information. We do recognize that, as was stated before, a lot of these things seem to be building the airplane in flight, and we recognize how much they are changing. And but thank you for the information, and we will make sure we get some of our questions and the feedback from our members at this time. I guess we've got a couple minutes before we can turn the time to President Searle for a few closing remarks. If there's just a burning question from somebody who is on the phone, who hasn't had the opportunity to have the chat feature, again, if you are on the computer, use your chat feature. If anybody on the phone has any burning question, please just let us know. Looks like plenty of feedback. We will operate under, if you do have a question, I do know we have several people on the line who have great networks and communication channels. I know we have a lot of people on the line with their own networks and communication channels, and I'm sure they're anxious to hear from the boots on the ground and the farmers in the fields. So if you have anything, again, please utilize any Farm Bureau Federation staff member as a resource. And again, we will make sure that these questions get answered to the best of our abilities. I think at this time, a couple of things before I do pass it over to, well, I'll turn it over to President Searle. If you have any closing remarks, and I'll finish up with a few review of a couple of the resources that we have.
Let me get unmuted. Well, thank you, Braden. Thank you to those who have presented some things. and I recognize there are several questions. This is a platform. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. This will be an opportunity for each of you. As Braden mentioned, if you've got questions, reach out to our regional managers within Farm Bureau or our staff. I'm always happy to field phone calls as well, anything that we can do, because we are in uncharted territory. Let me just talk for just a moment about American Farm Bureau. American Farm Bureau is a 6 million members strong, and all those in Idaho are part of that. And as quick as this happened, we began having conference calls on just at first almost a daily or every other day basis. We've moved out to about a weekly there. We've also had conference calls with USDA, with Secretary Perdue. 2 days ago, we had the Deputy Director Sinke on the phone with us. And their first questions were, what do we need? Obviously where are we bleeding the most? And we've heard reference to the $9.5 billion in the CARES that's there and available. The request that's came in very quickly, and it way exceeded the $9.5 billion that's sitting there. And we haven't even began, in my opinion, yet. And so it makes me think that, and that's what I'm appreciative of everybody being on the phone today. We've got to we're brilliant. People are brilliant in agriculture and in positions that lead. We've got to put our heads together. We've got to look down the road and say where we're going to be in a month, 6 months, 3 years, and 6 years, and how do we get there so that we can go forward together. Because that's what USDA asked, Secretary Perdue asked. American Farm Bureau a week ago today delivered a letter to the USDA with requests for direction that they had asked for, and I know that many others have. So that request is going out and being fed and being addressed. Not quick enough. I'll just tell you what, every time when Secretary Perdue's on the phone or Sinski's on the phone, the question's always, when will we see some of the benefits to help stop some of the bleeding? And Secretary Perdue's words are always, we're striving to be as quick as business. And obviously there's a lot more hoops with government, so he recognizes it won't quite be that, but it's being addressed, and hopeful that within the next day or two or three, and I know answers are starting to come, but we'll have more answers. But it's back to you as individuals, farmers and ranchers on the ground. What's your experiences? What's happening, whether it's with a PPP or whether it's an H2A or whether it's just being sustained, whether it's milk going down the drain or whatever, and how to take care of that. That is all, they're all aware of that. They're very aware of it, and they're addressing it. And there's no promises today that any of us can give other than the fact that there's a lot of involvement. We have a very friendly administration that has been very open to those. So that's my invitation today. And again, the purpose of the meeting was to get an update and how we can rally around. You know, you look at this, it's discouraging, it's tough, but there's always some bright spots I think that we have to look at. Number one is, as hard as it is, we come together. No matter our differences, we have to come together. We have to continue to work together. We'll get through this. We will. It won't be easy, and we all know that. But we'll get there, and we've got to look towards that, and we've got to continue to reach over the fence to our neighbors and out to industry and pass things on so that we can be sustained and go forward and stay committed to agriculture. So I feel that commitment, and I felt it on every level, from the President of the United States right on down to the individual farmers and ranchers. It is discouraging. I think sometimes we have to turn our head and not watch whether it's the cattle market every day or the potato market falling, or hear some of those things. There's some tough things to stomach, but we can do it. We've done it in the past, and we'll continue to do it. So again, Any questions that you have, we look forward to fielding them, to pass them forward, because they're continue to ask for them. We've heard the ask today. We look forward to that. So Braden, I'll turn it back to you, and thank everybody, Braden, for moderating and taking care of the meeting today.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you again, President. We really do appreciate all of your efforts as well. We recognize how busy you've been fielding questions and also gathering information. And certainly at this time, I think that's the best that anybody can do is gather all the information. We recognize that this might seem duplicative to so many people, but at the same time, we just hope that everybody recognizes that we are doing our best to disseminate the information that we have. And it might not be, they might not be complete answers, but at least you know that we're here and we're certainly trying. I think Brian has mentioned about all the phone calls that he's on a national level here in the state. We are a part of the governor's industry task force that we meet weekly with his staff to provide updates. And so we would encourage our farmers and ranchers, our members, to get us the information so that we can, again, funnel that up to the governor so that he can hear exactly how this is impacting you and what things we can do, whether it's on a local, state, or federal level, what we can do to better help our producers, because we do recognize you as essential. We also recognize that there'll be this industry that will pull us out of any recession that is caused by this, just as it has in the past. Also, I want to make mention that our information division has created a coronavirus resource page that can be found from our webpage. If you go to idahofarmbureau.org, it will direct you to where the COVID-19 page can be found. The direct address is idahofb.org/COVID-19. And we've got a whole bunch of information, a lot of resources right there, and we update that on a daily basis as well. One of the latest posts as well as an interview with President Searle with a staff member, just giving some direct updates from what he's getting on the national level again. So again, we appreciate this. I'm looking at the chat box. We do have a number of things and questions coming in. And so again, this has been recorded. We will put a date stamp on it as well, and we'll make sure to follow up with all of you. Thank you again, and we appreciate it.